When I first came into this worldview back in late 2018, my entry point, you could say, was through Varg Vikernes and his former YouTube channel, To Lay in Perspective. Oh, excuse me. Technical. Boomer tech. From him, I learned a lot about him and his wife Marie's views on our native European ethnic beliefs. Then I discovered the authors Vegard Solheim and Stefan Cvetkovic. Since then, I have branched out into many other topics regarding our folk, movement history, philosophical, and ideological intellectual pursuits, and a plethora of other ideas. I am not a member of any organization or public-facing group, as I have made it abundantly clear in past videos. I find myself leery of such things. Infighting, snitching, our scene can be a minefield of such deleterious pitfalls. I favor networking and doing all we can to reduce our dependence on the system and navigating in such a fashion to exploit the system where we can find the gaps. But that's enough about me. Tonight, I want to return, in a sense, to my entry point. I want to discuss the Asatru Folk Assembly. They do a few things that I am interested greatly in. Number one, they are providing an interpretation of our ancient ethnic spirituality in this otherwise vapid, shallow spiritual desert of modern-day Ameriqua, as my friends call it. Number two, a strong effort at building parallel structures to reduce our dependence on the system, encourage a sense of self-reliance, community, tribe, and family building. Number three, charitable efforts. While not as flashy as marches, protests, and speeches, I think this is very needed. The native European has extremely few charitable organizations in this country and abroad. Welcome to the SoNo Show, episode 38, interview with Matt Flavel. So without any further ado, here is the guest. How are you doing tonight, Matt? I want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. If I was any more fine, I would be frog hair, you could say. That's just a hillbilly idiom, I guess is what you would call it. So I know you're a very busy man, and I want to thank you deeply for coming on here to discuss your group. So I've got several questions here. I want to thank my friend Stone Ox, his wife Furious Wolf, for getting us together about a month ago. And I'd also like to thank Appalachian Highlander and his lovely wife and the Appalachian Asatru group for giving me a list of questions and helping me to form this interview, I guess you could say. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started here. Matt, what would you, in your own words, describe the Asatru Folk Assembly as?
I mean, I could go on. It's many things, but fundamentally, it's the church of the ICER here in Midgard.
Yes. Very nice. Do you know, let me see, what's the next question here? How long have you participated in the Asatru Folk Assembly and led the organization?
So I was trying to look into that on just how long I've been participating in one way or another. The furthest back I can find a record of it was in 2009, but I believe I was involved a little bit earlier than that. But that was the time I became what's called a folk builder in Alaska. And I was living there at the time, and that's kind of our entry-level leadership volunteer position.
Yeah.
I've been the Alsherjargothi, which for folks that aren't familiar, basically the high priest of the Asatru Folk Assembly since midsummer of 2016. So just about 7 years right now.
Have you enjoyed your position? I'd say it can be very stressful. You are absolutely committed to this. I mean, it is your life, I would imagine.
Yeah, so it is absolutely, my whole life is connected to it one way or another. I'm a father, I'm a husband, but fundamentally all my life revolves around the Asatru Folk Assembly. And it is absolutely, sorry, we're just going through an earthquake right now.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's kind of strange.
Wow.
So to get back on track.
Wow, that's wild.
No, it really is. We don't get them here often. We had 2 small ones yesterday. So
anyway. It's like a small tremor, I guess.
Well, no, this one was pretty decent.
I heard.
Kind of curious what it's going to come out as.
I heard something fall in the background. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it rattled the shutters and everything. But you know what? There's absolutely stress and there's absolutely weight. And I never want there not to be weight to it. It's a tremendous responsibility to be the Alsherjargothi of the Asatru Folk Assembly. But any of that said, it is the biggest blessing, the biggest, honor of my life to be able to do that. And I'm so very proud to be in the position I am. It's stressful sometimes, but it's supposed to be. That's what leading's about sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You talk a lot about pressure. Pressure though, that's what makes the diamond shine, I guess you could say.
Yes, indeed.
Going back just a brief second to the previous question, you said it was the Church of the Aesir in Midgard.
Yes.
And this is a question that I was wanting to ask a little bit later, but I think this is a decent time to ask this question. Y'all worship the Aesir, the Norse gods and goddesses. Have y'all ever considered looking into some of the other various European pantheons, perhaps like the Hellenic, the Celtic, maybe even the Slavic? I'm just curious about that, because I will say this. I think if you're here in America, you definitely have some Germanic blood, most likely, if you've been here for at least over a century or so. But myself, I'm a mixture of Germanic and Celtic ancestry. I do not know. My knowledge on Celtic mythology is very vague, unfortunately. Have y'all ever considered branching out to these others, or do you prefer to keep it within the Norse pantheon because perhaps it is the most, you could say, the purest pantheon, I guess I don't know if that's the correct term, but anyway, I just thought that was an interesting question I would like to ask you.
No, absolutely. I think it's a question a lot of people have, especially here in America, where we have a broad range of European ancestry amongst us.
Yes.
So first, yeah, we absolutely have looked at those and studied those. And the AFA is now, and it always has been, pan-Aryan in our faith. We believe that the gods of our folk are expressed in these different pantheons by different groups of people due to the relationships that they've developed. But fundamentally, they're the same divinity, the same spiritual forces, yes, just with different names and different relationships, much like, for example, friends that I went to school with know me one way. My father knows me as a son. My daughter knows me as a father. My wife knows me as a husband. Folks in the AFA know me as the Alsherjargothi. Guys at the gym may know me as something else. Those are all me, but that picture looks really different depending on what group of people has that relationship.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the most perfect analogy, but I think that's the case with our gods. And we go through we use the Germanic or the Norse names and understandings of our gods because those are the best, as you said, the purest in the sense of they come to us the clearest.
Yes.
They were written down they're one of the latest groups of source mythology that comes to us, so we get a clearer glimpse of them. And also,
Yeah.
that is the form that they've taken that have inspired our folk and become so successful. And following that success, we want to honor that instead of looking for what else we could possibly do. We want to go with the folks that brought us to the dance. And that is the spirituality that's awoken in the soul of our people. That is the names of the gods that have resonated and brought us to where we are today. And so, for lack of confusion in the AFA, yes, we refer to our gods and our goddesses by their by their Old Norse names and Norse perspective.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you answering that. That was just a random question I'd thought up the other day. Let me pull the list of questions back up here. Hey, everybody in the chat, I apologize. I've not really paid attention to what's going on. I've got several tabs open. I just want to say thank you all for coming here to this episode and to hear Mr. Flavel talk about his organization. So let me pull this back up. The final question in this little introductory section is, how did you work your way up into your position and title?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, I don't like to halfway do stuff. So when I got involved, I was living in Alaska, and there really wasn't a lot of AFA activity up there at the time. So I wanted to jump in and help and see what I could do.
Yeah.
And it was presented to me that they needed a folk builder up in Alaska. And, great, sign me up. How do I do it? And I really threw myself at it as best I could. And I had some success in Alaska and building our folk up there. And as part of that.
What year was this, if you don't mind me asking?
Again, we were trying to run it down in our records, like when it got announced. I know I was a folk builder before I had gone to my first national AFA event. My first national AFA event was in 2010. So sometime before that, I want to say, I feel like it was 2008 or earlier, but somewhere around in there. And so, I was trying to do what I could locally and organize the folks that I could. Alaska's kind of spread out, and it's not a very population dense area. So took a while to get that going, but it snowballed into a really nice group up there by the time that I'd moved out. But one of the things during that time I became aware of, at the time, the AFA had just one big national gathering a year. Yeah. And that was in Northern California. It was being done at Sons of Norway camp up there in the Redwoods. And it was midsummer in the Sierras. And I should have gone in 2009. I saw the kind of slideshow thing of the event, and I was kicking myself, and I knew I had to go. So I went in 2010.
Yeah.
I just fell in love with it. It was the first time that, I was around a substantial group of people. I don't know how many people were there that year, but I want to say 70 or 80. And they were all us. They were all our folk. They were all Asatru. They were all there practicing this that I felt so lonely in doing for so long. And man, I completely fell in love with it. And I tried to make my way to every national event I could from that point going forward. And that I realized that I was spending, most of my year, I was spending 360 days trying to arrange my life so that I could have those 5 days living the way that I really want to live. And so I tried to change that and restructure and make the AFA what I'm centering my life around. And so that led to relationships with other folk builders and other leadership, and gradually kind of worked my way up. The guy who was the folk builder coordinator, which was a position we had at the time, he he saw something in me, and I became the assistant folk builder coordinator. When he became ordained and moved up in the organization as a Gothi, I took his spot as the folk builder coordinator. And then, as he moved up further, I kind of followed in his wake there for a little bit. I got ordained in 2012 and became a Gothi. And at that time I was on the board of directors in 2012. And so
you rose quickly through the ranks, definitely.
Well, I did. I was very fortunate that way. It was a lot of work, but I think it was a lot of just commitment and loving what I was doing and loving our Asatru Folk Assembly. Yeah. And then when Steve McNallen, our founder in the first Alsherjargothi, decided to step down in early 2016, I got elevated to take that spot, and I got installed as Alsherjargothi at Midsummer in the Sierras, which by that time we had our own Hof at Odenshof.
Yeah.
The same event that I went 2 years ago that I just fell in love with it. I got made Alsherjargothi 6 years after that first event.
Man, that's awesome. So yeah, it was a lot of commitment, a lot of work. I bet that is a very powerful feeling, being around. So like the first time you mentioned when you had went to the first gathering there in 2010, how you said there was 70, 80 people there. I bet that was a very powerful feeling. I've met several people since I started this channel a few years ago, but I've never had a large group together, and I feel a special, it's just a special connection whenever you meet someone new that thinks like you, that your heart is in the same place. So I couldn't imagine, having 70, 80 other people,
No, it was amazing. And one of the things that I will always remember that stood out to me is I think we're eating breakfast one morning, and we're all in this, big chow hall eating breakfast. And there was some culturally diverse question. And so instinctively, I'm used to being in a place that with that many people in a room, there's, it is, enriched with some kind of diversity. So I looked around to find, the closest Mexican guy we could ask this question. And it occurred to me like, no, wait, this is all us.
Yeah.
And that realization, oh, wow, this is just my folk. This is just my people it's something so simple, but it will always stand out to me. And it was really nice. The biggest gathering we've had so far was midsummer of last year at 154 people in attendance.
Wow.
So yeah, it was amazing.
That's quite the crowd.
Absolutely amazing.
That's impressive. Awesome. Let's see. Let me pull up the next question here. Now I wanted to go into the section talking about the ASA True Doctrine and beliefs. This is where we get into the metaphysical, the theological part of the interview. Mm-hmm. What are the basic tenets of your organization's worldview? Like, since I mentioned earlier, Varg Vikernes is how I got drawn into this. Before that, I was just a normie, basically, maybe you could have maybe called me a conservative or something like that. But, I didn't know that there was actually really such a thriving sort of community. And that's what I kind of seen with Varg's videos. But over time, I've learned that there are so many different interpretations. There is the folkish interpretation, which is more aligned with our views, but there's even differences and caveats within this. Varg, some people would call him a sort of atheistic type pagan. Some people are interested. Some people believe, that gods are physical beings and things of that nature. That's basically what I'm just trying to ask here. Um, let me see. Let me pull that question back up. Um, I guess this will be this question is kind of redundant, but I just want to say, do you believe that the gods and goddesses are real in the physical sense, that they are metaphors of archetypes from our people's history or forces of nature, our ancestors, or a combination of all the above?
So, first and unequivocally, our gods are absolutely real. They are absolutely conscious. They hear us when we reach out to them. They share in the gift cycle with us. I believe that with 100% of my heart. I know that that is true. What shape that forms, it's odd because when you say physical, certainly they could manifest themselves physically if they choose to.
Yeah.
But I think it's beyond that. And I think physicality, I guess, lowers them in a way to our existence.
To our plane of existence, you could say.
Yeah. And so certainly they could manifest themselves physically, but they're absolutely real and individual. They're not concepts. They're not personifications of natural forces. They're not archetypical forces. I mean, they do serve as archetypes in the sense that they are the source of our consciousness and our most primal examples. They are archetypes in the same sense that, you know, your father or your grandfather is an archetype of how to be a man. But that said, I do believe that they're our most ancient ancestors and that they are connected to us fundamentally through our very blood and DNA. So in that way, I do believe they are our most ancient ancestors in the fact that they gave us life, but they're not, you know, they're not deified humans, they're gods.
Yeah, I understand. I appreciate that answer. Let me see here. Let me see what I got next. Does your organization, like, do y'all believe in reincarnation, or what are your thoughts about the afterlife, I guess you could say?
So when you want to ask about reincarnation, I think that's where it really depends on what you mean by the word. We believe that we as Aryan people have a multiple part soul.
Yes.
And parts of our soul absolutely do reincarnate down the line with our family, or if people are through their naming practices or whatever else. So pieces of that do reincarnate in a way. But fundamentally, we don't, you know, the one for one reincarnation, like, aha, I was so-and-so in a former life. Not so much. Not that that's not possible. Certainly, if the gods will to make that happen, I believe they can. But I don't think that's how it typically works. We believe very much in the idea that we go to our ancestors when we pass. Whether we stay there or not, that's a different question. But initially, we go to our ancestors, and they are gatekeepers in a way of our afterlife. They can accept us and share their halls with us. We can spend time with them and commune with our ancestors.
Yeah.
I think for folks that are particularly heinous or judged to be unwanted by their ancestors and by the gods, if someone is that bad, our lore talks about the dissolution of that person's soul and basically recycling that person that is so awful that's the situation. But I think that's rare. The other thing that's also rare is the idea of ascension, the idea of us moving closer to the gods in the afterlife. Now, that doesn't mean that we become gods, but the idea of sitting in the halls of the gods, of communing with the gods, of being something more than we were in life, I think that's something that happens to heroes and people who the gods judge worthy of ascension, of becoming more.
That's a good answer. That's interesting. Honestly, I could talk about some of this stuff. I could listen to you talk about this stuff all day. Let's see. The next question I have here. Okay, going back into your past a little bit, what were the origins of your beliefs?
Well, so growing up, my family wasn't very religious. I think that we were nominally Protestant Christians of some stripe, but neither of my parents were particularly church going. So I guess I was raised with a Christian, I guess, worldview in a very broad sense, but without any specifics. And I always wanted more than that. I had a spiritual need. I was a very spiritual person, and that wasn't fulfilled. When I got into my later teens, I spent time with my aunt and my cousins, and they were Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
So they were really active. They were, experts on their Bibles, because they, I will give Jehovah's Witnesses that they're very good at stripping down Christianity to its biblical roots and removing all of the pagan traditions that have been co-opted by Christianity in medieval Europe.
Yeah.
So it made it very, very clear to me, that contrast. And I tried hard. I read my Bible 3+ times all the way through. I thought, maybe if I wasn't getting it, if this, perfect God says this and I don't understand, then it must be me. So there must be something I'm not getting. And I figured out when I was about 18 that, no, I don't think it is me. The God of the Bible is not good. But I didn't know there was another option. So at this point, I was still of the mindset that this is the God of the universe. And it was terrifying, but I decided that I didn't want to be a hypocrite, and that God was a bad person. And therefore, I didn't want any part of being on that team. And that was really scary, because I didn't, it's not like I left to jump to something else. I just realized that everything that a young man wants to do in life is sinful according to that conception of the world. And that's not something I'm any part of. So I left, and I didn't know what to do, but I still felt the need for spirituality. And I looked, and, what did my folk have before? Because I realized that, the Bible takes place in the Middle East and is about Jewish people. Well, what did my people have?
Yeah.
Exactly. I knew about history and I knew vaguely, but I wanted to dive deeper. And how does that work? How did we worship? How did we do these things? And in doing that, I started, becoming Asatru before I knew what that was. At one point when that faith had been awakened in me and I wanted to worship our gods, I was looking and Googling online about, I thought I was going to get historical sources, but I came upon the Alsherjargothi Folk Assembly and this guy, Stephen McNallen. And I watched and I saw, wow, there's real people in, whatever it was at the time, 2001, 2002, that are doing this. It's not just me. There's other people doing this. And I was hooked at that moment. And that's when I came home, and I've been here ever since.
It's an interesting story. Your story is a little bit similar to mine regarding Christianity. I was raised Presbyterian myself. My family, we weren't overly religious or anything. We'd go to church some Sundays, but even as a child, I remember reading the Bible. Now, I have never read the Bible all the way through. I think I've only sat down and read maybe the first 6 books of the Old Testament, bits and pieces of the Old Testament, and the Gospel and Romans. But, what you said right there just struck with me, that a lot of the things that you want to do as a young man is, it's kind of frowned upon if you follow the doctrine. So anyways, let's see. I'll jump back to the list of questions here. Okay, well, you touched on this in the last answer, but do y'all ever make attempts to reach out as sort of like pro-white Christians? Have you ever done anything like that? Because I think here in America, everybody, well, maybe not everybody, but the majority of our folk, they start out with some denomination of Protestantism oftentimes. There's some Catholics and there's some Orthodox in there as well. Do y'all have any sort of way of reaching out to these, what you could say, pro-white Christians?
No, not overtly, but I think that's a demographic that we'd certainly like to reach. The trouble is them getting together as a group is about their Christianity. And, it's not like we can call up local Christian churches and want to come there and talk about Asatru.
Yeah.
So it's not like we have a very proactive outreach that way, but we do have overlap with a lot of people who share our worldview, but happen to find themselves Christian at the time. And we talk with a lot of those people, and we do end up getting quite a bit of those people to come home to Asatru. Most of that's done through private conversations between individuals where our circles overlap in the world.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, definitely. Okay, let me jump to the next question here. This is a personal one of mine. Who is your favorite philosopher, would you say?
So this one is tricky because when I look at historical persons to emulate or to learn from, I like active people more than I like contemplative folks. So
I see what you're saying.
A lot of the people that truly inspire me wouldn't be described, I don't think, as a philosopher. But as far as people who would describe themselves as philosophers that I like, certainly my favorite is Julius Evola. I've read everything that he's written that's been translated into English, certainly everything that I can find. And
what did you think about Ride the Tiger? I'm actually reading it right at this second.
So I made the
Ride the Tiger.
So it's a tale of two adventures on that. The first one, mistakenly, that was my first Evola book I tried to read, and I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah,
I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't familiar with his worldview, his phrases. There's a lot of terms and things he repeats very often. And I wouldn't recommend that as the first Evola book anybody reads. So I got lost. I put it down. I didn't pick it back up again for a few years. When I read it the second time, I thought it was great, but that's because I'd had a pretty solid background in Evola's other works before I got there.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake that I'm currently making myself because I don't know, maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand it.
There was an internet group at one time, Elders of the Black Sun, and they had like a flow chart of in what order that they suggested you read Evola's works. And then all of them laid out on this map and this flow chart on how to do it. And a friend of mine and we both got into it at that point, decided we wanted to do that, and we started there. And that really helped me a lot. I was really happy I did that. I think it took me about two and a half years or so to get all the way through it. But I thought that was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot that way.
That's awesome. Let's see. Next question I've got here for you. Tell us about your favorite bloat and the role of ritual in your organization.
So I have been really, really fortunate to have been in a lot of really amazing bloats. I've been able to lead some bloats that are tremendously powerful to me, and I think really special things were accomplished during them. But my favorite bloat that I was ever a part of wasn't one of mine. It was Githia Pat Hall did a Deseer bloat at winter nights. And for those who are not familiar, the Deseer are our ascended female ancestors that look on from beyond the veil and take care of us and look after us in the afterlife, and they look on to us. And the AFA celebrates at winter nights, which is basically, our Halloween, if you will.
Yeah.
Because that time is the closest where the veil is the thinnest between the worlds. And our ancestors, particularly the Deseer at that time, are closer and more viscerally able to interact with us than at other times of the year. So we do this Deseer bloat, and what was it? I want to say 2016. I want to say 2016. Yeah. Could be off. Could be 2017, but I want to say 2016. And anyways, she was doing this Deseer bloat, and as part of it, she had us call out the name of one of our female ancestors and invite them to be in the circle with us. And so she went around the circle doing this, and I did. I called on my grandma, Mary Ann Davis, my mother's mother. And she had us close our eyes. And as she went around the circle to ask that ancestor to be there with us. And so at that moment, because my eyes were closed, and so everything other than visual, I felt my grandma give me a hug. I remember she passed in 2001, I believe, and this was 15 years later, but I remember how tall she stood and where her head was in relation to mine.
Whoa. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
I have no idea what happened either. I've actually never have had that happen. I don't know what just happened.
All right.
Boomer technical difficulties. I don't know. It just said my internet connection was working, but it's like, oh, disconnected. But I don't know. But anyways, continue on. Did you finish?
Yeah, where was I at?
You were talking about the bloat you had. Well, so the name.
Pat, Githia Pat Hall went around, and she had us close our eyes and ask for our female ancestor to be with us. And again, my eyes were closed, but I remember my grandmother, she passed in 2001, and I remember how tall she was, where her head was on my chest. And it was like it wasn't like my grandmother gave me a hug in that circle. I could smell her old lady hair product. I could feel, what it felt like the last time I gave her a hug. And it was the most visceral experience that I've ever had in my life that way. And it wasn't just me, but it was very profound to me. But a whole bunch of other grown men left that circle crying like little kids that night because it touched them so deeply. I feel really silly. Every single time I've talked about that, I tear up, and I really can't help it. The connection was so very real and so very visceral that it bypasses everything else in your brain and goes right to your soul. And it was, that was my favorite ritual I've ever been in.
That's a deep spiritual experience. Sounds like very deep.
It really was. She was amazing. That bloat was by far my favorite. But I remember your question was a two-parter, and that was the first part, but I don't remember what the second part was.
What is the role of ritual in your organization? It seems to be a very important sort of like bloats are very important to your organization.
Well, it is. So ritual is that point of connection between our gods and our folk. And as priests, as Gothar, it's our job to facilitate that connection through ritual, and as well as many other things. But a fundamental to our job is providing that connection through ritual. But also in a big concept to all of our rituals is the idea of the gift cycle, is sharing of ourself with our gods and our gods sharing their blessings with us. So that's the fundamental of any bloat, is that idea of us offering up our loyalty, our love, our worship, our gifts to the gods, and then asking them to bestow their blessings upon us and receiving those blessings. We do similar things, but the idea of community sharing like that, we do similar things with our feasting and our sumbul tradition as well. But all of our ritual goes back to that gifting cycle.
Interesting. I had never heard of this gifting cycle. That's interesting. Very interesting. Anyways, I just want to say again to everybody in the chat, I want to thank y'all for stopping by. I've not been able to pay as much attention to you guys as I normally do, and I apologize for that. But the last question that I have is, would you ever consider working with pagans of our folk from other groups such as the Odinic Rite, the Noriana Society, Wolves of Vinland, or others? Are you open to working with them, or?
Well, it really depends what that means.
Let me phrase it like this. I was just curious. I had someone ask me this actually in the Appalachian Asatru chat. They said, would y'all ever consider recognizing perhaps Gothi from these other organizations, or is it pretty much just in-house, I guess you could say?
Well, it's a big difference of scale. And I've always said this. There was a time when we did more of that. And there was a time where the AFA, okay, for example, you mentioned the Odinic Rite. In, I want to say like 1999, there was the International Alsherjargothi Odinic Alliance, which was basically a cooperating between the Asatru Alliance, the Asatru Folk Assembly, and the Odinic Rite. And at that time, there was, some sort of similarity in membership. That's really changed. Most of the other organizations that were a big deal at one point have diminished very greatly. It would depend on what working with them looks like. What, quite honestly, I think is much more efficient and much better for us to do is those much smaller groups join the AFA and we can all move forward under the AFA's banner, than diffusing our energy with one group that's got 1,000 members and other groups that have 20. And that's the number that was said to me about from Mark Purrier of the Noriana Society, is there's about 20 people that are an active part of that. I don't really think that's, working together. I think the way of working together is the other folks who want to practice Asatru getting on the team, joining the AFA, and we can all move forward that way. And as far as that's concerned, there's some people, certainly elders that have been around a very long time, that we would very much consider recognizing their statuses as Gothar, but most of those are from Steve's generation and from that foundational generation of Asatru. As it is now, in the world, I mentioned earlier, I don't feel that we are a church of the ICER. I think that we are the church of the ICER. I think they've given us their blessings, and I would encourage other smaller groups of Asatru to join us, and we can be stronger because of it and move forward united.
Interesting. Let's see. I think that is my final question I had regarding the spirituality, I guess you could say, theological component. Now I want to talk a little bit about the history of the AFA and perhaps some of your operations.
Okay.
I may have asked you this earlier, and if I did, I apologize, but the question I have is, when did you first meet Stephen McNallen?
I met him at that first midsummer I went to in 2010.
Okay.
I actually got there a day early because I wanted to make sure I was there to help set up. So I got to spend a little time with him before the event officially started.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'd already asked that. I remember from earlier. But let's see. There's a quick question I've seen from the chat. This is kind of off topic, but I'll go ahead and ask it. Destination Travel asked, what do you know about the Ora Linda book? Do you know much about that?
So, less than I should. It's something that I've tried to look into, and I think I'd be a liar if I told you I was an expert on it, but I have looked into it, and I've looked into the story of, how it came to be in its modern form, how it was, I guess, discovered or rediscovered. I'm familiar with it, but I'm certainly no expert on it.
Yeah, I'm not either, to be honest. I remember, I think it was a year or two ago, I watched a video by Asatru. He had made a pretty informative video talking about the Ora Linda. I'd like to look back into it myself. The next question, if Stephen is considered the father of the AFA, what would you consider yourself?
So I wouldn't. I am the Alsherjargothi of the Asatru Folk Assembly. Beyond that, I think that's up to others on what they would consider me. I mean, Steve didn't bestow that upon himself. That's what we all look to him as, because we recognize that contribution that he's made over the years. My peers and history, I think, will judge me with whatever they'd like to call me. Hopefully it's something positive.
It should be. Let's see. Next question. What would you define the mission of the AFA as?
So I could get fancy, but I think that the best way to do that is our declaration of purpose. And this is fundamentally our mission. And I think that the first one is the most our mission. There's 9 planks here. So the first one is our mission is, or our purpose is, the practice, promotion, development, and dissemination of the religion of Asatru. Second one is the preservation of the ethnic European folk and their continued evolution. Third, issuing a call to all our brothers and sisters of the ethnic European folk to return to their native religion and way of life. 4, the restoration of community, the banishment of alienation, and the establishment of natural and just relations among our folk. Point 5, the promotion of true diversity among the peoples and cultures of the earth. 6, the fostering in our people of a deep sense of responsibility and self-reliance. And 7, the use of science and technology for the well-being of our people, while protecting and working in harmony with the natural environment in which we live. 8, the exploration of the universe in keeping with the Faustian instinct of our kind. And 9, the affirmation of the struggle of life, welcoming the challenge of that struggle and living life wholly and with joy. and facing eternity with courage.
All right. That was a fine answer there. Let's see. Okay, the next question. Did you get your wife to join Asatru, or did she already align spiritually with Asatru beforehand?
Yeah, I was very fortunate with that. My wife was going to say she may even be an AFA member slightly longer than I was, if not about the same amount of time. I met her in 2014 at Winter Nights in the Poconos, which is our big East Coast event at the time. And I was coming in from Alaska and she was coming in from Florida. And we had mutual friends in the AFA that kind of introduced us. And 2 months later, we moved down to Florida and started pursuing her and made her my wife. And now we have a beautiful baby daughter that's 3.
Well, that's awesome. Y'all came from opposite ends of the continent. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Next question here. What all has the AFA accomplished today with the various HOFs? At this moment, you have what? Is there 4 HOFs currently?
Currently 4 HOFs.
Yeah.
I suppose that's a big question. What all?
That is a broad one.
So one of the things that is very special about the time that we live in is we're able to be that generation that gives HOFs to our gods again. Our gods have been without places of worship for 1,000+ years in some cases.
Yeah.
And we get to be part of that generation. I've commented on this. My daughter, who's 3, she will never know a world that didn't have HOFs to our gods. And that's a huge accomplishment, I think, with the establishment of HOFs. And I think we're able to repair the distance between our folk and our gods in a really special way by reestablishing HOFs to them. I think that our relationship with Odin, with Thor, with Balder, and with Njordr is much better today than it was because we've been able to give them HOFs in this world and have their folk gather and do bloat to them in their own house of worship. And like I said, that hasn't happened in over 1,000 years.
Yeah, that's, I find it pretty impressive what y'all have done. Didn't y'all just open Njordr's HOF? It's located in Florida, isn't it?
Yeah, it's located in White Springs, Florida, and we dedicated that in August of last year. Yeah,
it's just, I think I'd read, it's just about a mile or so from the Suwannee River. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. That's, did the idea of putting Njordr's HOF in Florida, did that have a sort of geographical bearing since Florida is a peninsula?
Well, yeah, we were, excuse me, I'm sorry, I've been sick, just kind of getting over it.
Oh, you're okay.
We were very committed. So to backtrack a little bit with our HOF adventure, we could have put the first 3 HOFs in a lot of different locations, but it was really important to us for Njordr's HOF that we put his HOF near the water. So putting it in a coastal state was really important. Yes. That narrowed it down, and we had to look, where did we have a thriving population of members that could take care of it? Where did we have leaders that were dedicated to be there to perform services? And then, where are we able to find property at a reasonable price that we could do? And, we'd looked at a couple of options. I think we were looking at, so I think in the broadest terms, we're looking at possibly somewhere like Massachusetts and New England, Washington on the coastal side of the mountains there, the Gulf Coast in Texas, or somewhere in Florida.
Yeah.
And we whittled that down to, the Gulf Coast, either in Texas or in Florida, and then whittled it down even further to Florida, which is our state with the second highest membership. So it was a good choice for us.
Interesting. Let's see. Next question. I wanted to talk a little bit about the hierarchy of the AFA. And from my limited understanding, it is the members, and then the folk builders, the Witten, the Gothi or Githia. And what is a process that each rank must satisfy? Like, go ahead.
Okay, so the first step in leadership is being an apprentice folk builder. And that apprenticeship period is a time where we can kind of train people up in what all that job entails. There's a lot of back end stuff, a lot of technical things, a lot of social media stuff, ability to, teaching people how to get folks together and host events and share those, and a lot of nuts and bolts things.
Yeah.
But things that are very important to the AFA functioning like it does. And that's a period of time where we get to feel out if that person is doing the job that we expect in the way that we need them to. And also for them to feel out, is this something they really want to do? Do they feel comfortable with things and how they're working? Is this something they want to pursue further? And if we want them to advance and they want to advance, then they take their oath and become a folk builder. So our folk builders then get the opportunity to be invited to take our Gothar program to become ordained as a Gothi or a Githia. And
how long is that process usually? Because I would imagine there's a lot of instruction and sort of education that comes with it.
So there is. We have. So ideally, if we spot that that's someplace they want to go, that's someplace we want them to be, as folk builders, we have some preparatory training we do before they're in the Gothar program itself to prepare them, to get them really solid in the fundamentals of where they need to be into the Gothar program. And there's no time frame on that for sure. Once they're in the program itself, the program is typically between 1 and 2 years of instruction and on-the-job training, as it were, to become a Gothi. When they're ordained, their job is not just the things you would think of as a priest's job as far as ritual, but also the management of the folk builders underneath them. And it's one of the things, it was very important to us that our Gothar have to come up through the ranks and do some of the more mundane nuts and bolts things, do a lot of the hard work that's often thankless, that they do that and they show their commitment to that before they get to perform the rituals and do the more high church function of that. But also with being a Gothi, there's certainly all of the rituals, there's the management of the folk builders, there's the running of the AFA, but I'd say the biggest thing our Gothar do is counseling and working with our members when they're going through the various struggles in their lives and providing that counseling. That's a huge thing our Gothar do. The next step up from the Gothar is the Witten, and that's a limited number of people. Right now, it's 5 individuals, and they're all ordained Gothar, but as Witten, they're in charge of the running of the AFA and of their advisors to me. And we meet, the Witten and myself, we meet virtually every 2 weeks or twice a month. Sometimes it works out different on the weeks, but twice a month.
Yeah.
And we discuss, all of the things pertaining to the AFA, be them, theological, be them, administrative, whatever else. And we basically plan, how we're doing things, how we conduct stuff, and what we're doing going forward. And they advise me. And then as the Alsherjargothi, the final call on things rests with me. The responsibility rests with me, and yeah, that's our hierarchy.
Nice. Let's see the next question. You run a podcast called Victory Never Sleeps. Do you have a certain process for selecting topics and choosing guests?
Sort of. So this actually coming up really soon. I'm going to have to check on that. We are just about 1 year exactly into the weekly Victory Never Sleeps YouTube live podcast deal. It depends. I mean, we think up topics that we think people would like to hear about. Honestly, the show kind of starts out with a topic to get the ball rolling, but most of it is a question and answer run program.
Yeah.
So it depends. Every other week, I have Witten's Fawn Harrell on there to talk about lore or a particularly deep spiritual subject, because he's got a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge to share, and he's got a special gift for that. So we bring him on, and he's my guest host about 50% of the time. The other, we alternate. We try to get exposure for different Gothar and different folk builders. Right now, we're in the midst of doing a series of Asatru heroes. We have a number of Asatru heroes that we honor with days of remembrance, and we're trying to do a little biographical information on those, help our people get to know a little bit about our heroes. So we're in the middle of that series right now. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do next, but it's important to me to try to get people the opportunity to get to know some of our folk builders and Gothar, because they do a lot of work for us, and I don't think they get the exposure that they deserve.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You've got to venerate those who came before you and have, laid the groundwork for what you're building on.
Absolutely.
I actually see a question here from my friend Hans. Hey, how you doing, Hans? He's got a question. Let me post it here. How do the locals near these established locations or the hops respond to the AFA? Anything notable?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that's really important with all our Hoffs, and this goes into what you're saying, in, I want to say 2017, maybe even 2018, we started running a food pantry out of Odenshof. And we would have, initially it was with the food bank. We do it independently now, but originally it was in conjunction with the food bank there in Yuba County. And we would, once a month, we'd go out there and distribute food to folks that down on their luck needed something to eat. So we would do that food pantry, and that started, and we've been committed ever since then. Every single month we've done that at Odenshof, and it's been essential to us that we start that at each of our Hofs when we open them. So we have monthly food pantries at each of our 4 Hofs every single month, and it has been a really special way to show our face to the community and to be neighbors. One of our values is being good neighbors and being noble people. And part of it is, helping folks out and being good to your community. That has been huge in the locals. And again, it's not monolithic. I want to say the locals love us, and they do. I'm sure there's some people in each of these communities that are grumpy and don't like us. But overwhelmingly, we've gotten really good responses from people who are actually our neighbors. At more than one of our Hofs this year, people have donated natural gas to us for heating and whatever else. Like they had a credit and have given it to us just anonymously to say thank you. We have folks come by at Odenshoff and make us cookies and whatever for the food pantry sometimes. A whole lot of people are very appreciative of that. And we've got really good relations there. That's in Brownsville, California.
Yeah.
The media made a real big stink around Baldershoff because we had to. So for anybody who doesn't know the story about Baldershoff, in Murdoch, Minnesota, we had purchased a former, I want to say a former Lutheran church there.
Yes. Yes. I remember reading about that.
But in between when it was a Lutheran church and when we got it, some overly ambitious folks decided they wanted to buy it, rezone it as residential, and remodel it. And they didn't get very far with it, but they got the zoning messed up. So we had to get the zoning back right. And that brought some negative attention in left-wing circles. And there was this online outcry. And there was actually a group of people there called the Murdoch Alliance Against Hate or whatever.
Yeah, I've seen this video. There was a guy named Thorson that voted to approve.
So we had this nonsense largely from literally Antifa and from some other left-wing news outlets. As time went on, it's been really nice because they beat that drum and it didn't work. And it showed a lot of the folks in the community that they were being lied to. One of the founders of that Murdoch Alliance Against Hate since came by and apologized to us and says, hey, we're great. He's glad to have us in the community. And he's sorry that he believed the media on it.
Wow, that's interesting.
So they made this big stink, but nobody locally seemed to have a problem. We've got, old folks that come by and wish us well that got married in that building, 50 years ago and are glad we're doing something nice with it.
Yeah.
One of the ladies in the city council there comes by and has coffee with Argothi there from time to time. Our neighbors treat us great. We got a little shamrock card in the mailbox on St. Patrick's Day saying that the community is so blessed to have us with them.
Well, that's a good sign. I wouldn't doubt a lot of those people that were there protesting it. I remember seeing in that interview that Thorson guy who I think was part of this town council that voted yes. He had someone from California calling him and harassing him. And, that's something that the left does is they mobilize and they, and it was funny. I did see that interview. It said a lot of the locals are upset. Man, these people ain't locals. They're from California.
No,
all these other places.
Well, so we had a couple of locals. First, nobody showed up to protest it. We had one group of like 5 left-wing folks that wanted to claim that they were Asatru in some way come up there and stand on the front porch and blow a horn really poorly, and then they left. They just were there for a photo op.
Yeah.
We had the local so we had all these threats online and from California and from these other places. But as far as people that actually showed up, there was I got this email from a girl at the time, some female, I didn't know her age. And she said, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm going to come and stand in front of your Hoff and protest things, but I don't wish you guys any violence or any harm, and it's going to be peaceful and whatever. And that's fine. It was nice enough. And she said, me and some people in my class. So I assumed it was some kind of a college class or whatever. No, it turned out it was a high school girl and some people in her high school class. And, I said to let us know if they were getting cold, if they needed to come inside and warm up, or if we needed to, get them some coffee or something. And it was, again, and it was really, really just a nice thing. Again, they said that the local Hispanic community was very concerned. And I said, who? Well, the local Hispanics.
There's not a lot up there, I would imagine.
I know. Yeah, I ran the numbers. It's 10 people. And I asked who. They couldn't tell me. And I said, oh, well, I counted on my hands. Those are our neighbor, the neighbors across the street and their kids. Those 10 people are the first 10 people at our food pantry every weekend, or not every weekend, but every month. And they don't seem scared. They seem very, very friendly with us. So no, the news is just making stuff up. What was really a big thing to us there was when churches in other towns nearby were directing their parishioners to come to our food pantry if folks were hungry. And that was really nice. Every time we go out there, I go there for their event once a year. And I've had this at a couple of places, but specifically at Baldershoff. If you show up dressed nice on a Saturday to stop by and get, an energy drink or whatever at a gas station, people will, hey, are you guys with that church, the Norse church there? And yeah. And then they'll have something really nice to say. We've made a good impact on every community we've been in so far, and we're very proud of that. We're going to keep doing it.
I understand. That's good. It's a positive thing, to have a decent working relationship with the community. Let's see. You pretty well answered my question about the charitable efforts. That's something that I myself am very interested in. The next question: what is the largest expense of the AFA?
So that one's kind of tricky, and I mean, okay. The largest expense is the purchasing of our hofs.
That's a huge expense.
The purchase, as far as a single expense, the purchasing of Sigerheim, which is about 70 acres of land that we're building on and doing things on, that was the biggest expense. Very close behind that was Njordshof.
Yeah.
But that's as far as like one chunk expense. As far as upkeep, Odenshof is our biggest expense. It's in Brownsville, California, and California is a very expensive place.
Yes.
Yes. So I'd say that's our next biggest expense.
I would imagine so. I couldn't imagine living in California. I've heard we have a lot of people here in East Tennessee moving out. I mean, they come here from California. But anyways, let me see what the next question is. What is your favorite festival or event to attend at the Hofs, and which one of the Hofs is your personal favorite? I imagine that could be a difficult question.
Well, it is. So I'm trying to think of what my favorite. Okay, so as opposed to one of our bigger gatherings, my favorite event at any of the Hofs is Yule at Odenshof. And it's not a big national event, but we do get a lot of people there locally. But it's Yule, and Yule is, I mean, it's
that Yule. Time of year.
Yeah, it's the time of year. There's something in the air. It's cold. We all grew up with those kind of traditions. All of the fun things about Christmas are Yule traditions of our ancestors that were co-opted, except for the major scene or whatever else. All the tree and the ornaments and the spending time with your folk with good food and merriment around that holiday season. I love that. And that's really special. Now, my favorite Hof is, honestly, I love all of our Hofs.
Yeah.
My favorite, is going to have to be Thor's Hof in a way, because that was the first Hof we got under my administration. It was a really big thing for me to see that I could be able to do that and help our folk, like lead our folk in that process. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and I wanted to make sure I didn't make it up or mess it up, make sure I found a spot that was going to be good for our folk, that was going to honor Thor, that he was going to be proud of. And it was a real big thing for me personally when we achieved that. And so Thor's Hoff's my favorite Hoff for personal reasons, I'd say.
I understand. And let's see, I've got just one more question. This is the last question of this section, and then we're going to work our way to wrapping it up.
Okay.
Lastly, have y'all had to deal with bad actors, informants, or infiltrators of various stripes? And, how did the AFA handle these type of situations?
Yes, I think anytime you get past a certain number and anytime you are successful, you're going to have
You're going to draw that in.
some degree of that. I think that, as our founder, Steve McNallen, said, our folk have a soul sickness. And I think that as far as bad actors go, we have a crab in the bucket, moth to a flame psychosis amongst our people that when something starts winning, when we start doing too good, when something starts being too successful, you always have somebody that wants to try to pull it down or fracture it or fragment it from within. And we've had several rounds of that. And, I think that's bound to happen. And, I've seen it before, and I don't think we've seen the last of it, but we push through, we stay true to what we're about. We stay true to our mission. And usually when it's internal like that, that has a way of eliminating elements within our group that probably weren't healthy to be there to begin with. And we end up coming out stronger on the other side of it. As far as outside folks trying to infiltrate, I would be shocked if that's never happened. I have, a couple of folks have told me that they've been reached out to by folks to inform about us or, give people information about us, paid or unpaid.
Yeah.
And, those folks turned them down and let me know. I don't know how many others maybe didn't.
I have nothing to say is the only thing that these people need to know.
Well, here's the thing. One thing that I think is important to consider on that, though, we're not up to anything shady.
Yeah, that's
true. And one of the big things you asked how we handled it or how we continuously handle it. We are wide open. We are open. We use our real names. We use our faces. This is what we do. We certainly wouldn't invite infiltration in because that's dishonest and that's wrong. But if folks were curious about what's going on, we're wide open because we truly don't have anything to hide and we're not up to no good. I think the surest way to get negative attention that is first unwanted and second potentially very, very dangerous is to shut everybody down and be super secretive. When you build big walls and hide behind them, it's very easy for people on the other side to make up in their head what they think you're up to. And we've seen some really, really bad examples of that in my lifetime. So I think the best way to not get Waco'd is to
be transparent.
Yeah, be transparent. And it's not a trick. It's not a strategy. We're not doing anything wrong. We're the good guys. We're out here doing honorable things that we stand by. And that it may sound cheesy, but openness and truth are our biggest supports and our best armor in case anybody would want to infiltrate our organization.
I understand. Definitely. Let's see. Let me pull up. I was also going to say, once again, I know I've said it a couple of times. I'm sorry. I apologize, chat, that I've not been able to interact with you as much as normal. I've got so many things open right now. But I did want to say, if y'all have any questions, think them up for this last section. I don't want to keep Mr. Flavel too long. So if you have any questions, be thinking on them. And we're going to enter the last part of this interview, which is the future of the AFA. This is a personal question of mine. What do you think the future of our people is here in this nation and this continent? And also, what will society look like in 10, 20, maybe 50 years, in your opinion? I know I'm just asking you here to pull out the crystal ball. What do you think? What do you think the future is?
So, as far as the big picture of what America looks like in 10, 25, 50 years, I don't know. The signs right now are not leading in a great direction. What I think people in our circles often either prophesy or fantasize about is some kind of total collapse of things. And either fortunately or unfortunately, I don't think it's going to work like that. I think if we are going to continue to decline as a society, I think it's going to be slow and incremental. And I think that's how that works. I don't think it's going to, descend into Mad Max times. That's not how these things tend to work.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I'm not gonna put that evil on my children. I hope it doesn't. Yeah. I hope things get fixed. I hope people realize some of the very, very detrimental things that the past, 20, 30 years of culture have brought to us. And, I hope we turn it around. But here's what I can say. We're doing everything we can as the AFA to build our community and our society to be better. It's hard for me to prophesy about what the entire 300 million people in the United States are going to do. But our people, what we're already doing, and we're so proud of this, we're about to enter the second year. We just finished the first year of our ASA True Academy, which is our homeschooling program for our kids. First year was kindergarten. This year, we're going to have kindergarten through third grade able to apply, and that's going to keep increasing every year until we have K through 12. So we are going to take back control of educating our children, of raising them in ways that are healthy and that are good and that are honorable. We're going to build more hofs to our gods. We're going to establish community. We're going to get our people living closer together and functioning in a much closer way to how we have organically as a folk, to where we have communities of our people celebrating our gods and our traditions. So we're going to continue to build something very bright amongst ourselves. Now, if that's patched in to a thriving America, awesome. If that's, outposts of beauty in the Mad Max world that people, think might happen, okay. If it's just really bright places for our people to come home to when things continue to get more stressful and more degenerate in society over the years, we'll have that too. We win either way as long as we're doing it together and we're honoring our gods.
Sounds good. Let me see what the next question here is. What is your goal 10 years from now, either personally and or for the future of the AFA?
So I've gotten to where future of the AFA and personally are kind of one and the same.
Yeah.
The AFA is pretty much my life. So within the next 10 years, I'll be living at Sigerheim, and that's in Central Tennessee.
Yes.
We will have a Hoff first, we're going to have a Hoff to Frey. That's going to be in most likely in eastern Ohio, with a very slim chance of western Pennsylvania. And then we're going to have Tiershoff on the grounds of Sigerheim. We're also going to have a great hall at Sigerheim where our people can gather. Another one of the Sigerheim dreams is I want to have either cottages or a dormitory setup, some kind of a setup there to where our elderly or our cripples or whatever else, if they can't live on their own completely, can have a place where we as a community can help take care of them while they're still around our folk and still immersed in their faith and their culture without having to be, put away somewhere. We're not going to be able to provide medical care, but if it's just getting around, getting to the store, having somebody look in on them, we can take care of our elderly and our folks with health problems much better than we currently are, and we'll be doing that there. We're going to have, in the next 10 years, we're going to have a full curriculum for that Asatru Academy that I talked about. And if we extend that out to 11 years, maybe 12 years, we'll be able to, 12 years from now, we'll graduate that first graduating class of that Asatru Academy. But that's definitely going to be full swing. I think realistically in the next 10 years, we may have more Hoffs than just those next two. In that case, we would have Braggie's Hoff as well. So for sure, we'd have that. We currently have members in 14 different countries. I'd like to see some more countries involved in that. I'd also really like to see a thriving community of AFA members in South Africa within the next 10 years. We've been working hard on that. Our people in South Africa have a real hard time, and we've been trying to get that built and more unified, because I think our people need this there more than
that's a bad, terrible situation down there. What's going on? So yeah, let's see. And here's the last question I have for you, and then I'll go through the chat and ask some questions.
Okay.
And we'll get this wrapped up here soon. What do you think is the best thing for your organization to focus on based on your expectations and concerns for the future?
It's one of the things it's hard for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is we're very holistic. All of the different parts of what we do, they function, they interface with each other, so they're not completely disconnected. I think the most important thing is building a sincere and deep piety and religiosity amongst our folk. I think getting us focused on that kind of very real commitment to our gods and our faith, as opposed to some of the hobbyism that I think a lot of people start with. And that's not an insult. You can't build a deep faith overnight. It has to do with experience. And like any other relationship, it comes over time. But bringing our people to a much more closer, sincere religious experience with our gods. The other thing, I can't say it enough, but that Asatru Academy, taking back control of being able to educate our children and get them out of situations where they're being, intentionally corrupted or intentionally harmed in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Getting them in a spot where we can take care of them and raise them with values that we believe in. That's huge for our future. And it's harder to see and it's less flashy than the Hoffs, but it will pay off 20 years from now in ways that we couldn't even imagine.
Very good. Very good. So I believe that was the last question. It's been very interesting to speak to you, Mr. Flavel. I've really enjoyed it, and I think the audience has as well. So I wanted to give this, it's like I mentioned a few minutes ago. Do y'all have any questions? Ask them now, and I will go through them. I've seen some of them earlier. Any questions? Feel free to let me know in the chat, and we'll work our way through them before we close this stream out. Let's see. I've seen one back up here. I've got to scroll back for just a moment. All right. Okay, here we go. One from Hans. He said, "Can you share that I appreciate his conversation on Unslaved with, I believe, Michael Sarion? Did you go on his podcast at one time?"
I
And
did.
Whitehead.
I want to say that was 2017, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Hans, that's what he's talking about. Also, is there a hero that stands out for him, myth and history?
Absolutely. There are lots of them, so it's hard to narrow it down. Do you mean Asatru specific or historical hero in general?
Oh, that's a good question. He doesn't specify. I would
All
just
right, so
say in
let me do.
general.
I was
Or
going to
both.
say I can do both. There's a couple that stand out. This is not exhaustive. In Alsherjargothi, I mean, Steve McNallen blazed a trail to get us where we are. I'm big building the things that I have that are so special to me off of the foundations that he laid. So he's certainly a hero of mine. Alexander Rudd Mills, who founded the Anglican Church of Odin in Australia,
Yeah.
is a big hero of mine as far as Asatru goes. As far as history in general, there's a great number of people that I really admire. Teddy Roosevelt, in a lot of ways, I admire. He was one of those, I don't think he counts as a philosopher, but a lot of things that he said, especially his Man in the Arena speech, one of my favorite things. And I go back to it a lot. And his person, the way he built himself through activity, through living, through doing, is an example to us all. Nathan Bedford Forrest is a hero of mine. The Wizard of the Saddle was one of the most amazing men in times of conflict, as far as a leader of men, leading charge on horseback with pistol and saber in hand at the front, always with his guys, is an inspiration, I think, to many of us. Further back, there are plenty. I've always, I look up to Emperor Napoleon. Was also, he literally conquered Europe on horseback from the front, leading and doing and accomplishing. But those are a few, I'd say.
Yeah, that's interesting. As far as an American president goes, Andrew Jackson has always been my favorite. Old Hickory. He's a Tennessean. But let me jump to the next question. GC asks, what is the longest episode of Victory Never Sleeps?
I'm trying to think of what the topic was. I want to say it was this. We did a thing on the Soul Complex with me and Whit and Swan. And we did that for just about 6.5 hours. I think it was like 6 hours, 24 minutes.
Wow, that's a marathon. That is impressive.
It was long, but it was a really good show. And I think there was a lot of really good questions. But I think that was our longest.
Yeah. All right. Ima asks, what is the AFA's outlook for growing outside of the USA? I think you kind of answered that earlier.
A little bit. So we have folks in 14 different countries, as I said earlier. We had some really great momentum in Sweden before the world reacted the way they did to COVID-19. When so many things were shut down, it made it very, very hard for us to continue stuff internationally. With all the borders closed on everything, it made that hard. I think that. Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. Sorry, that's my daughter joining us.
Yeah.
You want to say hi? Oh, she's getting ready for bed.
How you doing?
So Sweden is a really good prospect. We've got a new folk builder in France. We've got some prospects for a folk builder in England as well. So that's all really promising. I think that Sweden is probably our strongest non-USA AFA territory.
Yeah.
But we've got some folks in Ireland and Italy. I'd like to see that come together on the continent of Europe a little bit better. And like I said earlier, we have members in South Africa, but they're very far apart. On a map, it looks really small, but when you spread it out, it's a huge, huge country.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see our folk develop there, and that's something that we, have our hearts set on.
She's having a good time. Looks like she got her a drink there and everything. But yeah, that's Sweden. There was a guy on here, one of my friends, Charles Lindbergh. He's from Sweden. Maybe he can get in contact with you all. Let's see. My next question I have here is Amara Arian asks, is there a vetting process and are there background checks?
Absolutely. So we have a security team, and this has been a work in progress. We're always trying to get better at it. We run a criminal background check. We ensure that nobody is on the sex offender registry. And what we also do is we check that periodically. We're going to check that periodically to make sure that nobody winds up on that list that we overlook.
Yeah.
But we do have a team of folks that look through, try to do background checks. We also try to check out social media to try to make sure, folks align generally with our worldview. But we run a criminal background check, the sex offender registry check. And we also do that for people who aren't just members, but people who are going to attend our events.
Yeah.
That's as far as the sex offender registry. The deeper background check is for membership.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was going to mention this to you too as well. One thing that you could do, I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Tom Metzger, but he was a very prominent member in the movement. One thing he mentioned in one of my friend's streams, my friend Patrick had interviewed him back in, I think it was late 2019, early 2020. It wasn't long before Tom had passed away, but one thing Tom did is he would also, like if he was vetting a member that was coming into his organization, he would also check the civil files, the civil suit files, like he would check the civil suits files. He said he found several. She's having a good time.
Yeah, she's trying to avoid bath time right now.
Oh, I understand. When I was that age, I wasn't a fan of taking a bath either. But yeah, that's just something you could say that is a possibility for you to get a better view.
Well, one of the things we're also looking into is if we can check the status of any, if there's any kind of a restraining order or any kind of active warrant out on folks too. We're always trying to look for ways that we can do that better. And so our security team's working on that right now.
Okay, let's see. Ulfbjorn, he had a question for me. He said, are you coming out to Sigerheim for Bloat on July 22nd? I might be. I might be able to work that in.
It's in your neck of the woods. I'd love to meet you.
Yeah, I think that's probably might be about 2 hours from me, maybe 2.5 somewhere. But yeah, I'll have to look at it. Let's see. Any other further questions? I'm having to scroll down here just a second. I'd like to hear from Matt. What is the AFA? Okay, I think I just read that one. I apologize. I've got quite a few new comments here, so I'm going to have to scroll my way down. All right. Actually, I don't think I see any further questions right this second. The chat is impressed with your daughter's antics. That's what it's all about, though, having the children.
She's a star of the show.
Legacy. Absolutely. Well, guys, I think that's all the questions that I currently see. Once again, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on here, for taking the time out of your schedule. I appreciate this. And I think I want to wish you luck in all your endeavors. And I hope everything, it's a special thing what I think y'all are doing, trying to separate yourself, building these parallel institutions like I mentioned earlier. And also the spiritual component, because I feel like America, or Ameriqua as we like to call it, is kind of a spiritual desert, you could say. But not to get into that any further, do you have any final words or parting statement? Statement.
Sure. First, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a great opportunity, and I appreciate it. I appreciate getting to speak to your audience.
Yeah.
If you are heterosexual and white and want to be part of what we're doing and build a connection with our gods, I would encourage you to check out runestone.org. And if you'd like to join, we'd love to bring our folk home. I would also say this to anybody out there that's curious and not quite, knowing what to do spiritually and not quite sold on the gods. Reach out to your ancestors. Reach out to your ancestors first. And when you reach out to the gods, go into it with an open heart and an open mind, and give them the opportunity to work within you. And if you do, I think some real beautiful things can happen.
Well said. And with that, I want to thank everybody in the audience for stopping by. I should have another stream here in the next week or two, but I hope y'all have a great evening. Thank you again, Mr. Flavel, and I will talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.